Hey, it's Eric G. Around the House is sponsored by Baldwin Hardware. For 75 years, Baldwin Hardware has been known for its first-class quality and craftsmanship in door and cabinetry hardware. As an alumnus of the Baldwin Hardware Design Council, I can say I have seen the details and quality from design to the finished product. If you're looking for a new style and old-world craftsmanship, I can tell you there is only one Baldwin Hardware. Check out what would look great in your home at baldwinhardware.com.
It's Around the House.
Nice. I got to ask you, what are your favorite tools in your shop that you're just jonesing on that you're like, oh man, why didn't I get this sooner?
So bandsaw and a drum sander are the two things that I couldn't believe. First of all, bandsaw is just so versatile, basically when I first got it, I actually thought to myself, I wonder why people get a table saw first before a bandsaw. I know a table saw might be more accurate for ripping and things like that, but you can rip on a bandsaw if you set it up right. And
correct.
You can do way more with it too, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, I am less scared of a bandsaw than I am a table saw by a mile.
Yes, 100%. That was my other thought of...
When it comes to remodeling and renovating your home, there is a lot to know, but we've got you covered. This is Around the House.
Welcome to Around the House with Eric G. This is where we talk home improvement, construction design, healthy homes, and playing around with power tools every single week. Thanks for joining us. We've got a good guy in the house here that I have learned a lot from watching his channel. And when I can learn from it, it always adds value to me, which means it can add value to you. Scott Couch, get off the couch. Design. Welcome to Around the House, my friend.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for having me. Pretty cool to hear you say that you learned some stuff from my page. I know you know a ton of stuff.
You know how this goes, though, brother. We all learn stuff from everybody. And as soon as you think you know it all, you're going to get your butt handed to you because we can't all know it all.
Isn't that the truth? There's a wealth of knowledge out there.
And so that's why I like bringing people like you onto the show because, man, there's always 4 or 5 different ways to do it. And I can't tell you how many times I see stuff and I go, well, I was doing that the hard way.
Oh, yeah. I'm always doing things. And then I'm like, how did I not think of that? That seems so simple.
Well, you're known out there for doing so many different stuff. I love your work with building signs and dealing with wood. You've even got, dealing with laser stuff. You got a lot of stuff going on, man.
Yeah, we just jump all around over here.
That's good.
Yeah, I do. I love the epoxy inlay stuff. That's really my go-to thing. I guess you could say. Yeah, really love playing around with the total board epoxy and doing the inlays and trying to match the colors to different signs or teams that people want.
It's awesome. Let's talk about those signs for a minute because, that is complex stuff and you can't just go out in the shop and do it once and have it end up perfectly because there's just so many variables. But what do you do when somebody says, hey, can you make me a sign? What's the process in that?
Sure. So first thing, I'll figure out what they want. A lot of times I'm doing sports teams logos, which I don't know if I should be or not, but
we're not mentioning sport teams. So guess what?
Exactly.
Personal use only. So guess what?
Exactly. This is all for me. So what I'll do is I'll take the design and I'll throw it into Aspire, which is a vector program, and I do all my programming in there. Sometimes if it's more complicated, I'll throw it into Adobe Illustrator or a different program. I have Lightburn that I use for the laser that you mentioned, and that is actually really good at tracing. So sometimes I'll throw some stuff in there to see if I can get a better trace out of that. But then once it's traced, I then will go through and figure out, which order to pour the pieces in. So I just did one for a Flamengo. It's a Brazilian soccer team.
Cool.
And it's black, red, and white. And so basically what I did for that one is I just poured a big area of black, then cut the red portion out, poured the red, and then cut the white out of the red, and then filled that in. So basically it's just a matter of figuring out which order to get it in.
So it's a lot like when you're doing, and I'm going to take it to something I know, like auto body, where you're doing layers of stripes or graphics in the car. You almost have to think backwards of how that's going to go, because sometimes the color that you think goes last actually goes on first.
Sure, exactly. Yep. That's like I tend to think of it as like the biggest, find the color on the outside and then work your way in. And that way you may end up kind of wasting some epoxy or whatever, but in the end, you get a cleaner look, 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense, because then when you're filling, you can fill in the pool or the hole versus trying to go the other way, which can make it significantly more difficult and not give you some clean lines.
Yep. One of the first times I did it, first of all, I used dominoes for my glue up, because I'll get maple and glue up a panel first before I mill everything. And I used dominoes. So once I milled it deep enough for the epoxy, you could see the dominoes. So that was a learning curve. Yep. But then also the other thing that I learned was on that same one with the dominoes, I tried to make pockets so that they were just touching, instead of just making one big pocket, like the one big black pocket, and then cutting the red out of that. I tried to make a black pocket, fill that, and then cut the red pocket and fill that. And I quickly learned that doesn't work, because I had little bits of wood between, and I was trying to chisel it out. And so just doing the overall big pour first and getting smaller and smaller seems to make it way cleaner.
Oh man, that's the big thing. I have not played around with epoxy. I think I'm scarred from back when working in a cabinet shop, and we were doing like the acrylic bar top stuff where you were pouring the clear, doing the old, polyurethane bar top material. And we had a bar that we had to do, and this thing was for a condo hotel thing up in the mountains. And we took literally tamarack logs with a live edge, and they wanted a pour over the top of that to keep it looking nice. And these were like 16-foot long, 4-inch thick pieces we were doing. And it was probably the biggest struggle without getting something to bubble or pop on that whole piece. You had to do it all at once. And I think it was our third try. We were about ready to throw the thing out in the back parking lot and burn it. By the time we were done, we were so frustrated. And these are professionals. These are guys that are doing this for work. And man, it was troublesome. It was troublesome back then, because temperature, humidity, all those different things were playing with us. And that was a tough project. I mean, it's still up there, but the other problem was the architect hadn't planned in that wood was going to move. And even though it was big, huge piece of kiln dried wood, it's still like to move as a bar top.
Yep. Yeah, that's, I can only imagine doing it on site like that. I've never done a huge pour like that. And on a curved live edge piece, I can only imagine not to mention the different temperature and humidity, like you're saying, no chance. I've done I think it was like a 2x4 foot tabletop that was just for my backyard that I did it. And that one was challenging enough, worrying about the bubbles and this and that. And I had a controlled environment in my basement. So doing that on site work is no joke.
If I would have done that today, I would have done it in epoxy, and I'd called Jess up and said, "Hey girl, how do we do this?"
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yep. She'd set you right in the right direction.
Absolutely. Because I got a feeling, even though that we had people that have been doing it for 15 years, we probably still weren't doing it the right way.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm sure Jess knows exactly what the right way to do it.
Yeah, we'll have her on the show here one of these days. She's been out traveling, teaching classes. So her and I are working on a schedule to get her on there, because I know I can learn stuff there as well. But man, you've been doing so many cool things with these signs. And what I like about them is they look solid when they're done. I mean, they are as professionally built as anything out there commercially, and you can just get those things dialed in.
Appreciate it. It's been fun trying to figure out the processes and whatnot. And along the way, I've upgraded tools to make it a lot easier. In the beginning, I was, using a palm sander, just sanding off the excess epoxy. And now I've gotten a lot smarter and use the drum sander or the CNC to clean things up. And it's way easier.
Let's talk power tools for a minute, because that is always a tough subject out there, and this is no different than people out there, the Ford, Chevy, Dodge debate with trucks. it's the Coke versus Pepsi, it's all of those different things. What do you like using?
So I have a bunch of Harvey tools in my shop right now. I had a bunch of Jet tools, but probably about 6 months or so, a year ago, I got maybe 2 years at this point. I got a bandsaw from them, and it was my first ever bandsaw, and super powerful, real awesome. So I ended up picking up their table saw too. It's 4 horsepower, and that thing's a monster.
Beast.
Yeah. Yep. And then as far as my other big tools, I've got some Super Max, some Jet. I really mix it in there, kind of just whatever I can get my hands on.
I think I even saw. Did I see a Hitachi chop saw in the background there one time?
I do. Yep.
That thing looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I picked up on a Black Friday one time because I really wanted a zero clearance because my shop is ridiculously small, so I needed that as much space as I can. So that zero clearance is huge for that.
Nice. What are you using for the drill drivers and hand tools out there?
I got all Milwaukee for all that stuff.
Cool.
A while back when I first started, I heard Milwaukee was good, so I got some. And then once you're on that one platform, I just
you can see there's a lot of red in my background here too, and my shop behind me. So
that's what my shop is, all black and red.
Yep, exactly. I got some yellow and black and some other colors back there, but there's a lot of red back there. And I think I'll be tossing a few more brands in there. I'm not loyal to one of them, but like you said though, man, once you get kind of going on a brand, and it's so much easier because no matter what brand you like, they got you on the platform thing. Why go have another battery charger? Why have another platform to have to mess with?
Exactly. That's what, as you're saying, you have, some black and yellow back there too. I'm like, oh yeah, I do have, a bunch of different platforms, but I really just, if I'm getting a new tool, I just try to get one that I already have the batteries for, because it's just that much easier.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff I have, if I have a different brand, many times it was something that, brand A didn't make at that time a very good version of that. So I went and got the best version that was available. And as you know, every year these tool companies are coming up with everything new. And sometimes they even jump the shark a little bit as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the DeWalt and Milwaukee lawnmower might be a little over the edge for me. But that's a little much for me. But if you have the batteries, I can see where it makes sense.
Yep, sure. Yeah, I don't have any yard tools or anything like that with those companies. But like you said, I had a nailer from one company, and it was great. But every so often, it wouldn't sink nails. So now I have a different company one, and it sinks the nails every time. But I think it was just that was the first generation that they put out. So
absolutely. So when you're doing these epoxies, man, what is your trick for keeping things clean? Because I tell you what, man, if you're not careful with that, you can get that stuff everywhere.
Oh yeah. That's, so I kind of got lucky. My shop is very small, so I couldn't do epoxy out there. So nice. I don't have to worry about the dust from there. So I have my basement turned into like a little epoxy studio, I guess you could call it.
Oh, cool.
And so I have some mats down there and things. It's all basically a corner of my basement is sectioned off just for epoxy. So my kids know to stay away from it. And I have a lot of pores going on, then basically nobody goes in the basement until they're cured. And I also use Total epoxy, and the 2-to-1 that I use, it cures pretty well within 6 hours or so. So I don't really have to worry about it too much.
Cool. How do you keep that from getting up in the house? Because I tell you what, if I was doing it in my basement, I'd be having my family mad at me if I wasn't careful.
For a while I wasn't wearing gloves, but now I wear gloves all the time. And actually my girls love it. I have 3 daughters, and they love coming down to do it with me. So nice. It turns into like one of those things like, can we do some epoxy? Can I come down and do some? So we do some almost family pours, I guess you'd call them.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah. That table actually that I was saying for out back that we built, me, my wife, and the 3 girls all picked different colors we wanted on it and kind of made it like a marbled look and just had fun with it.
Family time, man. Priceless.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Whenever the girls want to get in the shop, I'm always all for it and trying to get them hands on as much as I can.
That is awesome. And I tell you what, those memories like that, you think about stuff that you do with your family. I can think back of all the different DIY projects I did with my dad, 40 plus years ago, and there's still memories that are still solid right there. So that's pretty sweet.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. That's what actually got me into all this. My dad was a cabinet maker for 40 years. So
all right, let's talk about that a little bit. How did you get into this? Because, my dad he worked for the government, but he was Mr. DIY guy. We would be working on the house or we'd be working on the cars, and we were restoring classic cars on the weekends and doing that kind of stuff. And I spent 30 years in the cabin industry. So I want to hear about your dad here and how that goes, because that's a brutal industry to be in.
Yeah. So he was mostly in it when I was real young. When I got a little bit older, he threw out his back. And so I didn't really spend too much time in there when I was older. But so he had a cabinet shop for 25 years, I think it was, something like that. And they did a ton of different stuff for offices and buildings down here. This desk I'm sitting at right now, my dad built, I don't know how many years ago. And my mom is a court reporter, so he's built her desk that he has and all the cabinets at my old house and everything. So I remember growing up, we were redoing our kitchen, and my dad was redoing all the cabinets himself. And we've got like some cool cabinets that I've never seen before with you open up the cabinet and then it's got some part that spins out and you can access. Basically, he made it so we could utilize every portion of those cabinets. So it was cool to grow up around. But then once I got a little bit older, we needed a table for our house. So I reached out to a buddy and I was like, hey, he owned his own wood shop, and I was like, hey, I need a table. And once I found out, I was like, can I actually come work and figure it out and learn? And next thing you know, here I am, have my own shop and build my own stuff.
Nice. I will say something about the cabin industry, and it's kind of like, it's hard to get the stuff done at home when you're doing it all day long. So hats off to him for getting the home kitchen done, because in the cabin industry, that's the hardest one. I mean, I've got 30 years this year in the kitchen cabin industry. Last year was the first kitchen I did for myself.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just how it goes.
Yep. What's that phrase? The cobbler's kid never has shoes or something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's I was the poster child for that, and that's awesome. And then you got to learn as well a little bit from that. So that was a good role model of, hey, there's some cool stuff to play with here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember even when we would have our Pinewood Derby competitions for Boy Scouts, we would get to go down to my dad's shop and build some crazy Pinewood Derby cars that weren't just like the standard run of the mill Pinewood Derby car you'd get. So it was always cool.
That's awesome. I remember doing those as a kid too, and we'd get there and they'd be like, I'm not sure if that meets the rules, and I'd be going, read the book, show me and they're like, well, I guess that works.
Yep. So we made an ambulance one year, and they're like, I don't know, did you add stuff? And we're like, nope, all the same block of wood. It's all there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I was following the rules, but at that time the rules didn't, you could, as far as adding weight and stuff, they were pretty liberal with them at the time. And so I'm sure they've changed it since then, but back then you could add weight and stuff to it. And I was drilling out and putting lead shot in the back and, doing stuff to really balance stuff out. I was trying to make it like it was a NASCAR.
Yep. And actually it's funny that you say that, because it reminds me, one year we didn't get the chance to make one. So I used my brother's old one. And it was under the weight it needed to be. So we taped a quarter to the back of it. And I ended up almost like winning the whole tournament or whatever. But luckily I didn't.
Yeah. You're like, well, it worked.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That is awesome. Well, I wanted to ask one more thing. What's the secret of keeping the epoxy off the tools and stuff? Because, man, I tell you what, the clamps, the everything else, it always seems around the shop when you're gluing stuff up, or even when you're working with any of these adhesives and epoxies, that stuff likes to get everywhere. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So wherever I'm using epoxy, I try to keep a silicone mat under whatever I'm doing. Or if it's like a bigger thing, I have a big HDPE sheet and I'll put whatever I'm doing on there. So like today I have a bunch of coasters that I have to pour some tabletop epoxy on. So I'll just lay them all out across the HDPE and make sure it's nice and clean, and then just pour it over that, let it all cure, and then just pop it off with a scraper or whatnot.
Great tip.
Yeah, as far as clamps and things like that, use packing tape or like a Tyvek home wrap. Yeah. And you can wrap that around your clamps, your pieces. What I'll do is I'll take like a couple pieces of wood, square them up true and everything, and then wrap them with Tyvek tape and then use them with a clamp and to hold down whatever I need with the epoxy.
Nice. Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
There
and if
you
you
go.
ever do get in trouble, you can take a heat gun to it and loosen it up that way.
There you go. When you're like, went too far.
Yep. Don't ask how I know.
We all learn from those mistakes, man. Come on.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
I don't know how many times I've been sitting there, with that, can't remember the brand, but the yellow and black, hand wipes that come in that big round canister. I probably got some in my shop here. Those do so much good over cleaning up tools and stuff too. I don't know if you ever use those.
Are you talking like the firm grip ones or?
No, these are the ones in the yellow and black, kind of tube. They're like almost like a big thing of the Clorox wipes, but they're the hand cleaning ones that you get out there. I'm trying to think of the brand, but, man, those things I've used for cleaning up power tools and stuff when on the outside, when I get a mess, anyway, they're just the cleaning hands ones that you use out there. Those things will work good. If I'm like, if I clean it off my hands, maybe it'll clean off the tools and that kind of stuff. So I go through and after I'm done doing stuff, clean that up. Cause man, just stuff gets everywhere.
Oh, it sure does. I was actually, just before we got on, I was down in the basement because I'm getting prepared to pour those coasters, and the HDPE was covered with old epoxy. And, since it's in the basement, I was fixing a pipe. So there was a bunch of dirt and debris on it. But Total Boat has an eco solvent, and I use that. And that thing, I was actually kind of surprised at how much it got rid of. So there was like semi-cured epoxy and some hardener just all over there because I had an issue and, whatever. So it was all a mess. And I basically just poured that stuff on there and wiped it with a paper towel. And I was amazed at how well it cleaned up.
Nice. I got to ask you, what are your favorite tools in your shop that you're just jonesing on that you're like, oh man, why didn't I get this sooner?
So bandsaw and a drum sander are the two things that I couldn't believe. First of all, bandsaw is just so versatile. Basically when I first got it, I actually thought to myself, I wonder why people get a table saw first before a bandsaw. I know a table saw might be more accurate for ripping and things like that, but you can rip on a bandsaw if you set it up right, and
correct.
You can do way more with it too. Obviously.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, I am less scared of a bandsaw than I am a table saw by a mile.
Yes, 100%. That was my other thought of, why a table saw before a bandsaw. Because a bandsaw, obviously you can mess up with any power tool, but a bandsaw just seems a lot more safe. You can put something in and pull it back from the blade and not have to worry about it. Table saw, you put it in, you keep pushing.
You keep pushing, and if not, you're in trouble.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I'm in a bunch of woodworkers groups and stuff on social media pages out there, and I saw one this last week where a guy was ripping some wood on his table saw, and of course he said he had always been trained to stand not behind the blade, and it shot this piece of wood. It looked like it was about a 1x2. All the way back, and he had a thing of canned almonds on his shelf, and it jammed the 2x4, the 1x2, all the way through the can of almonds and out the back of it.
I believe it.
I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen it. I mean, but I was just like, wow, there is a graphic picture of a simple cut gone bad, and bandsaws, you don't get that. Oh
no, not at all. I had a similar thing with my table saw when I was first using it. I had a tiny, it was only a half-inch wide, but it stuck right into my garage door. And I actually left it there for a year and a half because I was just that's a good reminder to be safe because, everybody gets going and you don't think what's going on. And next thing you know.
There's a lot of guys missing the end of a finger out there that have used table saws for decades and they got comfortable.
Yep.
So
I'm hoping to keep all of my digits, but
amen. And, and quite frankly, this is not a commercial because I don't have any even communication with these guys. I can see where that saw stop technology out there could be helpful for a lot of people, even though you have to be a little careful with it because, if you've got damp wood or something like that, you can create some issues, but they do have a way to test that. But I could see the value, but man, those saws are not cheap either.
No, not at all. Yeah, but I can see the value in that being added to, many different tools. Why not? You have a spinning blade, and if you can stop it by just however it does it electromagnetically or whatever it is. But if you can do that to any blade, then why not?
I got to do that probably 6 years ago on a TV thing I was doing for our local TV station. I was out talking power tools, and we got to do that hot dog challenge. And where they take the hot dog. Oh yeah, that was intense.
Nice. I bet I've seen it done before. I've never seen it live.
Man, that thing.
Never done it, but
the energy of that blade spinning and then jamming that aluminum block into the blade. So it just took a nick. And I mean, if that would have been my finger, I don't know if it would have bled even.
Yeah, it's impressive. I'm just remembering I was in a shop that I was working in, and we were pushing some insulation with a metal backing on it through it, and didn't even think, but it conducted through the metal and it popped it down. And that it was quick, and it's amazing how fast it is. It's
violent, but it works.
Oh yeah. But I mean, it kind of has to be in order to get that thing down quick enough.
Yeah, it's cool. And I was impressed. I was like, all right, I can see the value of this. Do I own one? Nope. I haven't went on to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars for a good table saw. Yep. But maybe one day if I'm doing enough projects, I'm just not doing as much table saw projects right now, just with doing this stuff. But I could definitely see the value, and I can also make the argument that, it's more expensive, but if you're going to go out and buy a table saw, it's cheaper than what your insurance deductible is going to be. So, there is some value to that.
I want to say they came out with a job site one too.
They do.
I think they have the smaller one. So can be safe and within a budget.
Exactly.
And I'm not sponsored either.
So what are you doing out there too is, we could both use sponsors of this, right? So if you're SawStop, you're listening, we would love to see those in our shops. And I'll say for Scott too, that, you know how to get a hold of us.
Exactly.
Shameless plug. Well, I see, you're out there doing a lot of gluing up wood, like, for your tabletops or signs or anything else like that. And it's some really basic woodworking stuff, but I think it's very valuable in doing it right. Do you have any tips for our listeners out there that are thinking about, I got to glue something up, but I don't really know how to do that?
Sure. First, make sure your wood is dry and get proper lumber. I would suggest from a lumber yard or a mill or a kiln, not necessarily big box stores.
Good point.
And then you want to just make sure that you can get two flat surfaces. Basically, if you have a jointer, obviously that makes it the easiest.
So nice, man.
Oh yeah,
nice square edge.
Yep. So you can get those two square edges, and then have your table saw at a true 90. Get another square edge. Then from there, it's pretty simple. As long as you have everything squared up. I sometimes see people using like all these cauls and things to hold it down, and those are great. But as long as your wood is nice and squared and trued up and dried, should be able to sit right on those clamps and smooth right together.
Yeah, that's a question for the listeners out there. When was the last time you trued up your table saw? When was the last time that you trued that stuff up? When have you grabbed that Starrett square out there and played with it, Because we all, including me, it's been a long time since I've sat there and went, how close is that? Is 0-0, right?
That is a good point. I couldn't tell you the last time I did it on my table saw, but my bandsaw, if I'm ever back to the bandsaw, because again, that's like one of my favorite tools in the shop. But if I'm ever resawing anything with that, then I'll always throw a square on that.
Yeah, that's good stuff right there. And it's interesting. So what are you working on in the shop wise? Do you have like a single car garage, or what's tight for you? You were talking about your shop setup.
Yeah, so I have a single car garage, and just about a year or so ago, there's like a little alleyway on the side of it that's I think it's 5.5 feet wide.
Okay.
And just about a year or so ago, I bought a shed and cleared out all the kids' bikes and everything from that side and opened that up. But it is jam packed with stuff. I've got a 52-inch cabinet saw, an 80-watt laser, full-on bandsaw, and then obviously the miter saw and everything else. So I'm pushed to capacity right now.
You need a second story addition over that or something, right?
Oh yeah. I think all the time, where can I put a little addition on the side, the back, or if I can maybe just get my dust collector or my compressor outside. Cause those are just
square footage,
taking up space. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a struggle always. That's why actually my CNC and all my epoxy work is all done in my basement because I can't even fit the CNC in the shop.
Man, I tell you what, I got spoiled in the cabinet industry doing stuff where, we had some big unisaws and stuff, but having a CNC to be able to load stuff into, and I mean, we had the big CNCs where it was loading the sheet of 4x8 on it and, cabinet grade, large manufacturing, but holy smoke, set that thing up. And if you need to do a bunch of cut parts, that stuff pounds it out quick.
Oh yeah, CNC is such a game changer, especially those ones where you can just throw a sheet right on it and just produce a cabinet basically.
Yeah.
You can't beat that.
Oh man, we'd sit there. It was a big change because we had the one custom shop I was working at. They were doing a kind of a Euro frameless cabinet, and the guy had a really good idea. Everything was so datoed together, he could put a cabinet box together with no fasteners, and it would hold together. Yeah. That's how tight things were. I mean, CNC it could be assembled and it would just sit there because everything was kind of locked in together before glue, before everything. So it was really cool how that went. But wow, that changed everything as far as one yields, because we could, we didn't waste anything. You could sit there and optimize a sheet, and that thing was big enough that you could literally load up, 16 sheets of plywood or particle board or MDF or whatever we were doing, and it would just pump it out.
Oh, sure. That's what I have a buddy, Oscar at Naughty Dog Wood Shop, and he's out in California, but he's got a cabinet shop. And for the longest time, he's been just doing it with a track saw, table saw and everything. And he, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, got a CNC and he's got it all optimized and everything. And the way that it can just use those sheets and just rip through and produce a cabinet is ridiculously awesome.
And it's so accurate, but there's also so many little problems that I ran into too, that I realized that, particle board or MDF or one of those things, not so much, but when you get that accurate, I realized that, plywood is not the same dimension every time because they're veneers of wood. So we ran into some issues sometimes where we CNC'd it out. It was perfect, but we had to always keep into mind that the material, we had to gauge that material before we put it into the saw and optimized it, because we needed to make sure how tight it was going to be, because many times 3/4 inch plywood is not really 3/4. It's close.
Oh yeah. Sure. That's what having a set of calipers next to the CNC is very vital.
Absolutely.
Even those, the epoxy inlaid signs, sometimes I'll put those on the CNC and I'm cutting it, it's all ready to go. And I'm like, oh shoot, I never checked how thick this is for the final cut.
Yep. There you go. So what kind of woods are your favorites right now to work with? I mean, we all kind of have our go-to favorite stuff as far as projects. What are you jonesing on now?
Sure. So I've always been a big walnut fan. I think everybody loves walnut. But as of recently, I've been doing a lot of ash stuff. I made a headboard for my bedroom, and actually I recently made a kitchen table for our house, both out of ash. And just really like the clean look. You get some grains, but it's still like a nice, light, clean look. So I've been really liking ash a lot lately.
And it's hard enough that you can work with it.
That's the thing. It machines just like walnut or maple or anything like that, and it's nice and solid.
It's funny how woods kind of go into style and come out of style. I remember 15 years ago, like in the cabinetry world, 20 years ago maybe, alder was such a huge thing out there, which was people were using it as the cheap man's cherry. But I love to see that walnut has come back over the last number of years, because Walnut was so big in the 70s and 80s as a wood. I've loved it the entire time. But in furniture and everything else, walnut has come back heavy, which to me is beautiful anyway.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can never get enough too much walnut in my book.
Smells so good when you're working with it too. That's the fun stuff.
That's one of the best things about working with it. I love, milling up some walnut and then coming back out to the shop a little while later and just walking into that smell. It kind of reminds me of the shop I used to work in because we used to do so much walnut work there.
Nice. What are you doing out there? And this is something that I see that I get a lot of DIY questions on. And I haven't even asked you this before, but have you done, what are your secrets if you get a little dent in a piece of wood or projects? Do you have any cool little tricks for fixing wood?
Yeah, so I actually shipped something out a while ago, and during shipping or some point, it got a dent in it, got sent back to me. So I ended up sanding it down, and I took an iron and some water. I don't know if I'm sure you've seen that before.
Yeah.
And I was actually shocked at how well it worked. I just kept putting the soaking wet paper towel on there and throwing the iron on and letting that heat steam it a little bit. And little by little, it came right out. I was actually completely surprised how well it worked.
That's awesome. I've done that too. As long as you've got the finish off of there, it works pretty well. I've also bubbled clear finishes trying it, but,
oh, sure. I bet,
so you got to be careful with that. But yeah, I'd take a same trick. I'd take a Q-tip and really get it wet in there, let it soak in, and then do the wet paper towel and that. And, it's shocking how well that actually works.
Yeah, I had seen it online and things, but I never used it. And I was like, I'll try it and see what happens. And it was amazing how well it worked. I wish I had talked to you before that, though, because the Q-tip would have been perfect for the size of the little dent that I had there.
That's how I just, dip it in. It would just soak it up enough that I could sit there and just dab. And
Sure.
If you need to cut it down, you can also cut the Q-tip down to a finer point with some like sharp scissors and
sure, yeah,
get it a little more
smart.
trim so you can kind of drop it in there. But that's one of my tricks. Something else, and this is something great for you guys out there in our audience for fixing cabinets and stuff. We had one time a contractor had miscommunicated with the husband and put whole new kitchen in. Husband said, "Hey, this is where I want the handles." Wife comes home and goes, "That's not where I wanted the handles." And now we had almost a violent situation between them. And he actually brought in one of those furniture repair guys. I don't know if you've seen them. They're the guys out there that do like the fine furniture repair on site. They do the restorations and stuff. Yeah, they come in. He came in and fixed that painted kitchen. And these were factory finished cabinets. They moved them, put the hardware on it, and had everything pre-drilled, ready to go. He came in there and finished it, airbrush, all his little tricks of the trade, and you couldn't tell that there were holes an inch and a half away that were completely in the wrong spot. But it's shocking what real touch-up can do to wood out there. And I've seen them do it with cherry. I've seen them do it with other woods as well, and it was really shocking to see what they can do with that.
It's amazing what some people can do with certain different materials or techniques or whatnot, because I would have no clue how to get it back to that, maybe some clue, but to do it to the point where you can't tell that it was even there, that's impressive.
One guy I worked with, he had all these different woods of sawdust, right? And so he would mix up his own filler with glue and the sawdust, and he would patch it with that. So when the wood aged, it would appropriately age, because as you know with wood, if you're doing walnut or cherry or something like that, even maple that is, sunlight and UV does crazy things to those woods.
Oh yeah.
Later on the road, man, you'll see that spot every single time. And
sure.
I was like, okay, well, I've always known to do that with hardwood floors, but I hadn't thought about doing the repair that way. So it was always fascinating to see that stuff.
Right. That's cool to hear that somebody would carry around different samples of wood sawdust like that too. Because at one point in my woodworking beginnings, somebody said, save different sawdust. So for a while I had a thing of ash sawdust, a thing of walnut. And to be honest, I don't know where it is, but it would be nice to have that and just
yeah, exactly. Just for those repairs. Just for those repairs, and that's fun stuff right there. What are you doing for tool organization in your shop, man? Is there any secrets? Because you got a tight space, and so many people out there have tight spaces. I mean, I don't have that luxury of having. I mean, this is getting torn down behind me next week. I've got a new system coming in, but I'm curious to see what you're doing for tool storage.
Sure. So I actually just ordered a whole bunch of pack outs, and I'm going to try something new. So I've been struggling with, that's like the biggest struggle for me is tool storage and where I keep things and organization. So
yeah, I get that. In full disclosure, and I'll laugh and show you this. I have the same thing coming, and I'm waiting for UPS to show up. So if I pull open the app on my phone, you can see the Milwaukee tool thing, and it's all down there. That's all the stuff that's coming. So I got an 8-foot pack out system coming back here for me that's going to store all my stuff, because I'm in the same boat. Batteries, chargers, just all those tools. I got 2 huge toolboxes, and I still struggle with organization.
Oh, it's so hard. So I've been like, I go back and forth all the time. Do I stop working on projects and just tear down the shop and rebuild it up so that it's like semi-organized, or do I, bits and pieces? So that was part of my thought in ordering a whole bunch of pack outs. I'm going to try and slowly but surely get every tool in a pack out. And then I want to build up a wall where pack outs can all just be stored right there and labeled, and no worries. Tools will stay clean. So
yeah, I'll let you know how it goes. I'm curious. It's literally supposed to be here in the next few days, and then this whole wall back here is getting gutted down to the studs, and I'm gonna re-insulate with Rockwool and drywall up, and I've got some wood I'm gonna do back up there on the wall, and then put that pack out system on it. So it'll be pretty cool. But want to get that organized, because it's a battle, man, and you can be so much more efficient with space if everything has a home that it fits.
Oh yeah. That's what I have, like a shelf that's just like got a bunch of junk on it. And I'm like, if I can get spots for all this stuff, then you know where it is too. Cause half the time I'm like, I thought I put that on the shelf. I don't know where it went. But which, are you doing? So are you doing the new pack out wall?
Yeah, I'm doing I got like a 6 or 7 foot pack out wall system coming. So I've got all the racks, all the battery holders, all the drill holders, tool holders, all that stuff in the bins. And I've got even a couple of the cabinets that hang on the wall coming. I've got the whole system coming. So I'm very curious to see how that's going to work.
Yeah, I just took a look at some of that stuff, and it looks pretty solid. And the battery holders, oh man, that'll be so nice, because like right now I just have a stack of batteries on the end of my bench top,
like that?
Pretty much just like you have there. Exactly. That is exactly
over my other shoulder too.
The left side. Yep.
Same kind of thing. And I'm like, oh man, I mean, that's so much square footage being used up by batteries that I go over and grab off of it, but I don't need to have that, and of course I'm like everybody else. I try not to ever store them on the charger, because it's never good to have those things plugged in and sitting there, even though they're smart chargers. I just don't trust batteries from any brand as a whole, because last thing I'm going to do is burn the shop down with a bad battery sometime.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sure you have a couple of chargers sitting behind that stack of batteries like I do, don't you?
Oh, I have a shelf in my shed that has a huge tote in it, and I've probably got 30 chargers sitting in there. So
yep, I hear that. I got a tote full in the basement.
And I hate to throw them away, and I get buddies that'll go, oh man, I got to go buy a charger. I'm like, oh, hold on, just come by.
Gotcha.
Come get it. Come
Yep.
get it.
Yep.
Come get it.
Exactly.
It's way too many chargers. And I can't complain. I get that every tool could be for somebody's first tool, right?
Yep.
But if I could check the box and go, I could not use that charger, I'd be plenty happy.
Right. I'll take the battery, but the charger I don't need.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes a difference, and that's the one nice thing. And again, back to having tools, it's so great to be able to work on stuff and have a handful of batteries and never be worried about, oh, I'm going to run out. Even if you're outside tackling your own big project, not just doing something in the shop.
Oh yeah, sure. And even just having the battery platforms, it's amazing how I think I have one tool that like one handheld tool that is battery or plug-in now.
Yeah.
Everything else that I have is battery operated.
Yeah, I think I have gone through everything. I have one air tool left that's a crown stapler that I just haven't, I don't use it enough to go out and get it. If one shows up on my shelf one day, it shows up on the shelf one day, but it's not on my priority list to go out because I use it like every other year or something stupid. And I'm like, I'll get the hose and the mini compressor out and do that. Yep. But everything else, air tools, power tools, it's all gone. And quite frankly, my Milwaukee, fuel Sawzall works better than the battery than my other one that was plugged in.
Oh, sure. Yep. It's crazy how much these batteries can throw power like that. That's what mine's the same way. I have a jigsaw that's electric still, and that's the only thing, but I use it once a year, if that. So I really, unless one shows up at my door, I'm not going to be getting a battery powered jigsaw.
Exactly. So I was going to ask you, drum sander, man. I mean, that's cool. Those are so useful when you're doing something and trying to get something flat, sanded. Is that what you're using it for? Just trying to get like a tabletop finish on it when you use that, or?
So I basically got it for like two reasons. One reason, I was building some boxes and I was making splines. And I had a kind of a scary accident at the table saw. I was trying to cut some thin pieces. And I was using a sled. And somehow when I was pulling it back, it just hit the blade wrong. And it threw the piece back into my stomach, bent my thumb a weird way. Luckily, I didn't get cut, didn't get hurt other than the board hitting my stomach. And I was wearing a leather apron, and it actually protected pretty well, and I was nice. Shocked. Yeah, so I messaged the guy that made the apron. I was like, is this supposed to be like protective? Because it protected me.
Yeah, you're like, this worked.
Yeah, it was awesome. But anyway, so I was making splines, and I figured it would be a lot easier on a drum sander to get to that exact width that you need for the splines. But then mainly was the epoxy projects. So I was taking those, and I always like to over pour the pockets when I do them, and then sand it back down rather than so that everything can be flush and smooth at the end, rather than sanding the wood down to the epoxy.
Nice.
So
okay.
Yeah, so what I would do is I would, take 60 or 80 grit sandpaper and a random orbit sander and just go to town. And it would take me 20 minutes, 40 minutes to do one of those. But then once I got the drum sander, it'd take similar amount of time, maybe half the amount of time, but it's way less on my back, bending over, my shoulder, moving that sander. Now I can just run it through there, and then I can so I typically just leave like an 80 grit on there. And I'll just do it for like a rough sand, and then go through with the finished sand with the random orbit. Because, man, is that a lot easier.
Dude, I'm all about the easy out there. I'm all about the easy on that because it's brutal. Hey, I was going to ask you, since neither one of us are sponsored by tool companies, really, what's your favorite track saw out there? Do you have any brands of that? What are you using?
So, I have two track saws, actually. I've got a Festool TS 55, I think it is. And then I've got a DeWalt cordless one. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, I love them both.
Yeah.
The DeWalt one, I tend to use more often because it's cordless. So
there you go. There goes to the debate, right? You don't have that cord getting in the way.
Yep. And then, so I always laugh though when I think about a track saw like that in that aspect, because you see the cordless ones, but you're always connecting it to a vacuum anyway. So I take that DeWalt one out and I use the cordless, but it's connected to the vacuum. So really, like it has a cord. Just a thicker one. I
hadn't thought of that. It's just that's hilarious. I hadn't even thought of that because that's one of probably my next tool purchase is going to be a track saw, but there's just so many times I've gone, oh man, I build my own, straight edge and clamp it down and do that. And I'm like, I wish I had a track saw for this, but I just haven't created the storage space for it. So
track saw is a game changer. I mean, it's so nice to have. And I will say, out of the two that I do have, the DeWalt one is ridiculously powerful. And I've talked to other people that have that one. Mm-hmm. It'll cut through, like 2-inch hardwood single pass. And it's running on a battery. I think it might be one of those bigger, like 40 or 60 volt batteries, but it's impressive that it does it all on a battery.
Yeah, that whole flex volt system they have, I got to play with that. It was funny. This was probably 6 years ago. I was out in New York at my buddy Skip Bedell's house out there, and he did Catch a Contractor, and he's always on Fox and Friends doing stuff, but he was working with those guys, and he got the pre-release of that. And I was there when UPS showed up, so him and I unboxed that stuff. It was in a white box. They didn't even have the box figured out. Yeah. It was the early. It was just kind of a white box that came out of. It was not branded yet, and used that up. And I was like, wow, this is a game changer for putting serious power into a saw.
Oh, sure. It's amazing what these battery powered saws can do. I have I have a Milwaukee 18
That's
volt
what I have.
miter saw, and that thing is like ridiculous.
Yeah, I've got one as well. I've got the smaller, it's almost a trim saw. It's that 7 1/4 small one, which is great for just hauling around. And then I do have a big, like 12-inch rigid one that gets dusted off every time, and it's corded, but I only use it when I need to cut something really big.
Sure.
And usually it's just sitting in the corner of on the shelf in the shed, but that's what it's sitting there for. But yeah, the small stuff like that, when it's easy to handle and move around, and I've got the stand for it, it works out pretty good for just doing moldings and trim and that kind of stuff.
Sure. It's funny that you say that about the miter saw, because when I first got into woodworking, I was thinking, I need a miter saw. That's like very important. And it's funny how like often I don't use it, or like if I'm going to cross cut something, I'll just use the table saw to do it because it's right there and it's
just
powerful
click,
and
Yep.
And it tends to be a lot cleaner.
It does.
The miter saw throws stuff everywhere.
Yeah, and I've gotten burned trying to on that miter saw sometimes, and you're cutting a little piece of hardwood or something, and you cut it, and the edge of the blade grabs it or something, and ding, it launches off, and happy you got eye protection on because there's a little piece of 3/4 inch wood bouncing around.
Oh yeah, that was. If you get a board with any bit of tension in it, and you start cutting it, pinches that blade, then there's nothing you can do.
It's flying.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Scott, we're running out of time. What is the best way if somebody goes, man, I need a sign made, or I want to learn more stuff about doing this? How do they track you down out there?
Best way to get in touch with me is through Instagram DM. I'm working on updating my website. You can contact me through my website too. Working on updating that so you can actually just order right through my website. But best way to go through now is through Instagram DM for sure.
Cool. And that is Get Off the Couch Design?
Get Off the Couch _design.
There we go. And you've got a YouTube channel as well over there, correct?
Yes, sir. Get Off the Couch Design on YouTube as well. And we're on TikTok too.
There we go. All three. Yep. Love it.
Oh, yeah.
Love it. All right, brother. Thanks for coming on today. Good to see you again, and we'll do this again soon.
Sure. Always good talking with you, Eric.
All right. I'm Eric G., and you've been listening to Around the House.
Somewhere unseen and undiscovered, anywhere beyond the mean. Life is a love song, let's be lovers. We're all over the radio. Take my hand, I know where to go. All over the radio with you.
Hey, it's Eric G. from Around the House. Are you planning a decking or siding project this year? If you are, you've got to check out my friends at Millboard. Millboard is a completely different kind of composite decking and cladding that enhances outdoor spaces with enduring distinction. Hand-molded from the finest oak, it realistically mimics the natural grain and color of premium hardwood. If you're looking for something that doesn't look like plastic and instead real wood, check out millboard.com. Make sure and check out that interview we did just a few weeks back. That's millboard.com.